When Disney's Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, the movie, the game, was first announced, all of us at EXP Up sighed a little and then forgot about it entirely. Between the, let's say, tepid reception for the Avengers game and our collective exhaustion from the past decade plus of Marvel movies, Guardians wasn't in danger of being on our radar. So you can imagine our shock to see 2021's Game Awards.
Best Narrative goes to Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Against friggin' Psychonauts 2, no less, which we'd also like to talk about. Now, maybe this was just the out-of-touch elite in charge, allegedly pushing some sort of agenda and sucking up to big corporate money. What did the people, the real gamers, vote for as the best narrative game of 2021? Oh. You know what? Yeah, let's give Guardians a chance. And we were pleasantly surprised when we did. Upon reaching the credits, we realized it's a perfect example of the different storytelling strengths of film and video games. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is in a great position to draw from all the things that worked in the movies, without losing its own identity in a by-the-numbers adaptation.
Contributing members. Groot, a Flora Colossus, last of his kind, fearless in a firefight, an awesome best friend. Rocket, bona fide super genius and a wizard with explosives. Definitely not a raccoon. Gamora, adopted daughter of Thanos, deadliest woman in the galaxy. Need we say more? Drax the Destroyer, convicted serial murderer and galactic war hero, often grumpy. Last and definitely least, Peter Jason Quill.
That's it? That's all you wrote? It was a character limitation.
The movies picked an iconic roster of characters out of the decades of options from the comics and gave them a distinct design. The game uses the same characters and similar designs, but with its own thoughtful tweaks. For instance, the game version of Drax looks much closer to the MCU version than the comics. But they changed his tattoos into this neat circular pattern that chronicles the events of his life.
Like the day I became a man.
Gross.
And the day that Hovat accepted my proposal of marriage. And later the marriage ceremony itself.
They consistently use this style of writing in the other scenes, where we see assorted text from his culture.
That's a lot of brave Catathians.
After Thanos raised Katath, my people were left broken, physically and mentally. Their exodus led many of them here in great numbers.
The movies also established a tradition of feel-good soundtracks that felt like personally curated playlists of popular music, making some choice selections from a vast library of pop songs that often stretches back over 50 years. Guardians' track selection is larger than the movies, so you're not sick of it by the end of the 15-plus hour story. Plus, they composed some original music from an in-universe metal band called Star-Lord, which inspired Peter Quill's space alias. On top of all that, the game freely pulls some of its best aspects from the original comics, such as a lot of the world building, many unlockable costumes, the 4 elemental modes for Star-Lord's guns, and, most critically, Cosmo the space dog.
Always a catch, Peter Quill. And not fun kind with ball.
The first thing about Guardians that specifically captured the attention of our animator is the visuals. We were surprised too, it's completely out of character for him. This game pulls out all the graphical stops, especially where they contribute to the story. Film is a much more direct medium for capturing human emotion compared to video games. The best a big-budget game can do is usually expensive motion capture, combined with grueling work from talented animators. In that sense, Guardians of the Galaxy did a better job than the average game, but it can't quite compare with its filmed brethren. In exchange, making a video game means the developers had unparalleled freedom when creating the environments. The Guardians movies have some incredible scenery, but they focused their budget on those few shots and filmed the rest on accessible Earth locations or sets. For shame, Disney, all that money and you can't even film your space movies in space. Since game developers have to create every environment from scratch, realistic or not, they might as well get artsy with each one. And while we're talking about visual flair, they even added some tasteful jiggle physics, but not where you'd expect. When combined with the gameplay, these visuals are all the more impactful to the story. The environments aren't just the backdrop to a movie, they're spaces for you to personally explore, to an extent.
What's Captain distracted up to now? He calls us over, I'm done.
At the end of the day, you are the one petting the space llama monster, not Chris Pratt.
Ask Drax for a ration pack if you're hungry.
As Star-Lord, the player makes decisions throughout the story, whether they're presented during dialogue, while your team banters during a level,
I am Groot.
or through gameplay actions you might not have even realized were a decision tree.
I'm going after Raker. Don't follow.
What? Gamora!
These decisions can really make the story feel like your own, while still being the artfully crafted story the devs set out to tell.
That's great, thanks.
How do I have to say this again? No shopping for tech without Rocket!
For instance, the final scene our writer experienced was the consequence of a trivial decision he made several hours earlier, before punching a god and saving the galaxy.
You know what? Screw this. Cancel payment.
Peter!
The contrast in tone was genuinely hilarious.
What's happening?
We appear to have lost power.
Sounds like a Nova Core disabler. You guys paid your fine, right?
Oh, fuck!
Guardians also makes clever use of combat to help you feel the story. Star-Lord does little damage by himself, so the player ends up paying a lot of attention to their group's abilities and status. During the parts of the story where the team isn't getting along or is even missing members,
Gamora, no killing teammates!
Says who?
It's literally in your contract!
you have to stay on your toes and carefully manage your team's attacks and cooldowns. But as the team strengthens their bonds,
Pretty sure we're married now.
you unlock stronger attacks from each member, separate from their regular cooldowns. The Guardians of the Galaxy start off struggling against small groups of slugs and humanoid enemies, and by the end, they're fighting more mythical creatures and gods than more conservative JRPGs would throw at you.
Drax?
Not Drax. Thanos.
All through the power of teamwork.
Haven't had a brawl like this since the war!
We will give them a battle to rival the Galactic War!
And that's not to mention the huddle mechanic, where you can periodically gather your team, listen to their thoughts, and then pick a corresponding pep talk that grants them a buff and motivational music. Or if you screw up, it plays Rick Astley. Even outside of combat, you remove navigation obstacles by manually instructing each corresponding team member.
Rocket, you got the body of a little girl. Can you fit in there?
Try again, Quill.
But by the end of the game, teammates voluntarily start creating bridges, slashing vines, and crushing boulders in your way like a very well-oiled traversal machine.
Groot? Loving the initiative.
Even the writing in Guardians benefits from the video game format.
You say misunderstandings, I say open to interpretation.
For instance, they went way further with Star-Lord's character flaws than the films did, possibly because they didn't have to get approval for famous actors to act so shamelessly.
What are you doing?
Dance off, bro! Me and you!
We do briefly see in the movies that Star-Lord is carelessly promiscuous,
Look, I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I forgot you're here.
but then they quickly move on, and he spends a lot more time in love with Gamora.
No! What the hell?
I know who you are, Peter Quill.
In the game, however, Peter Quill never falls in love with anyone in particular, but we get frequent glimpses and mentions of him sleeping around, and not only with human women.
That is not a castle, it is an impregnable fortress.
So how do we impregnate it?
Ask Peter!
The plot also benefits from having several self-contained, simultaneous plot arcs.
Nexus, what are you...
Do you still have those suicidal urges?
What? No?
This is uniquely possible because video games are expected to be much longer than movies. Plus, this version isn't obligated to tie into any other media.
Where is Gamora?
Yeah, I'll do you one better. Who's Gamora?
As one small example, Drax frequently suggests solving problems by throwing Rocket over some obstacle.
How many times do I have to say it? We're not throwing Rocket.
Ridiculous. You were holding us back to spare the beast's feelings. When has he done the same for us?
He doesn't realize that Rocket's tortured history as a genetic experiment makes being used in this way a sensitive subject.
I'll show you, worthless.
But later in the story, once everyone has grown closer...
Throw me.
What?
Throw me! Just get muscles to huck me across. We ain't got time to argue. I'll make it.
Leave this to me! Whoa! You are a valued member of this team. Not a tool to be thrown about.
Every moment in Guardians is eventually tied up in some neat little bow like this, on top of its overall character arcs. In contrast, the movie shows some amount of character growth, but they're limited by runtime and an entire cinematic universe that depends on a consistent team dynamic. Now, we've been trying to avoid big spoilers so far, but we really want to talk about the main story for a moment here. If you're planning to play Guardians and you want to experience the roller coaster for yourself, you can click the timecode right here, or use the chapter links below.
It's okay. That was normal. Nobody panic! Oof, that was close.
The most interesting recurring theme is Peter learning to take responsibility for his actions. We first find him and the crew looting an old battlefield when the Guardians accidentally unleash a weird polygon storm that consumes their intended target.
Well, that's concerning.
This escalates into a threat against the entire galaxy until Peter admits his involvement and the Guardians face the storm and recapture it.
I'm the idiot who released this freak! I'm gonna be the one who puts it back in its bottle!
Their responsibility-taking reaches its peak when they vow to guard the storm together and personally ensure it won't escape again.
I fear we've fallen friends.
Unless there's a sequel, we assume. This creates a lot of emotional moments that don't often make the leap from comics to movies, full of bittersweet regret, guilt, and redemption.
Why didn't you say something?
It's not exactly a conversation starter. Hi, I'm Gamora. I murdered my sister. Can we be friends? Of course we can't. How can you be friends with a monster? Why would you want that on your team? A team I actually kind of enjoyed being on. All things considered.
I'm just saying it don't change nothing.
Actually, it changes everything. The most deadly woman in the galaxy just admitted she loves us.
I did not.
You did. You said you were in love with us right after the part about killing your sister.
I said I enjoyed your company.
That is the Catathian definition of love.
Like. I'll give you like.
Early in the story, the Guardians also thoughtlessly scam the intergalactic criminal and walking 80s album cover, Lady Hellbender. This leads to several surprising and entertaining boss fights against bounty hunters.
I am Captain Glory.
Until Peter realizes they're going to need her help in the finale.
How can you be certain she is not one of them?
I am Groot. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Nope, she's good.
A thread like this tends to be an unnecessary filler detour, but in the case of Gardeners...
Gardeners of the Galaxy?
So I let Groot fill out the paperwork.
It adds some satisfying gravitas to the moment when Lady Hellbender finally decides to join the cause.
We could really use some help.
You pay one debt, then create another.
It also brings us an incredible boss fight.
You said he had purple shorts!
And then this magnificent work of art in the finale.
That was just so...
metal?
For a more personal example of this theme, when the crew is arrested for trespassing in the quarantine zone, it is unsurprisingly revealed that Peter had a romantic history with his arresting Nova Corps officer Corell about 12 years earlier.
Hey, Corell! How you doing?
And she now has a 12-year-old daughter named Nikki. Peter works out a deal with Corell.
Why do I feel like I'll regret this?
And then quietly agonizes over his new responsibility until the other Guardians notice.
Ha! Congratulations, Peter Quill! You will make a terrible father. Unless the child is dead, in which case, does not matter.
Slowly, over the course of the game, Peter warms up to the idea of parenthood and wonders if he's even qualified to be the father Nikki deserves. Corell is consumed by the polygons Peter and company unleashed, right in front of Nikki, and Nikki's grief makes her the perfect target for an apocalyptic cult.
Mom is here. She's right here. Inside me.
Corell's surprise intervention from beyond the grave connects Peter to Nikki's mind, where he can talk her into accepting and facing her grief.
Well, there's a lot I don't know. How to keep my foot out of my mouth, how to not get arrested, how to console a 12-year-old whose very legitimate grief might just destroy the galaxy.
His advice is surprisingly therapist grade for a story about misfit superheroes in space anyway. And it might even be helpful to anyone in the real world who has lost someone.
It's an Earth thing my mom taught me. The idea is that you light something to remember someone, to pay tribute. I mean, it's not magic or anything. It doesn't bring anyone back, but... It's a gesture. A small thing in the face of a very bad thing. Sometimes that's all we have.
To complete his 180 as a character, Peter finds out he isn't actually Nikki's father, but decides to take her in anyway.
It's fine! Really, I can sleep on the couch.
The couch is filthy. I've seen the rodent relieve himself on it.
While Peter still isn't confident in his parenting abilities,
you can't look after a kid. You are a kid. You should arguably have somebody looking after you.
He realizes that it takes a village, and he happens to have one.
Yeah. So even if you don't have what it takes by yourself, you're not by yourself.
For those of you skipping spoilers, welcome back. We've been having a lovely time, but we did miss you. Long story short, we recommend giving Guardians of the Galaxy a shot, even if you're not particularly in the mood for Marvel and their movies or games. It's by no means perfect, but it feels more like a masterclass in interactive storytelling than just another superhero game.
What kind of name is Avengers?
If you've tried Guardians of the Galaxy already, what did you think? Are there any other cinematic, story-driven games you'd recommend in the same vein? We're in the mood for more, and they seem to be making a resurgence, in no small part due to Sony's exclusives and Microsoft's Game Pass. You can let us know here in the comments, or maybe even our new attempt at social media, linked in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.